pastor and walks out of church and goes to get in his car. He opens the door. You come up and behind him. It's after dark, and you shut the door.
I shut the door. Yep. I was upset, and I just remember him turning around, and looking at me, and he says, "Can I help you?" And man, I was really gonna give it to him. That I was drunk, no breaks. That's just how I was, and I was all geared up, and I just remember looking at him and saying, "I need help." That's all that came out. I need help.
Have you experienced firsthand a change in your life due to God? Are you looking for a change in your life? God's Spirit blows wherever it wishes. You hear its sound, but you don't know where it comes from or where it's going. It's the same with everyone who is born of the Spirit. Welcome in.
And I just remember him turning around and looking at me, and he says, Can I help you?" And man, I was really going to give it to him. That I was drunk, no breaks. That's just how I was. And I was all geared up, and I just remember looking at him and saying, "I need help." That's all that came out. I need help.
Of all the things you could have said in that condition at that hour, and that's what was able to be mustered.
Any other time, I would have said a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But I did, and he told me, he said, "Well, from the looks of things, there's probably not much I can do for you right now."
Sure.
But he said, "If you come back 8 o'clock tomorrow morning," he said, "I'll be at the church. I'll put some coffee on. We can talk."
That's a big ask, Rick. 8 o'clock the next morning.
Yeah, I think, got back home and, took my sleeping meds. And of course, I'd been drinking and I shouldn't have took them, but I couldn't sleep unless I passed out. And so I was pretty certain there was no way I was getting out of bed by 8 o'clock.
Wasn't likely.
No, didn't set an alarm, no. Passed out about 7:30-ish, something like that. My eyes, they open up, and now this is frustrating because I'm really, really hungover, and hungover don't begin to describe how bad I feel. And I rolled over to go back to sleep, and I just remember feeling so wide awake and being so upset, and I could just hear him, right? Come down at 8 o'clock. So I said, I'll go down there because I'm pretty certain the door won't.
It's going to be locked in.
No, it's not going to be open anyway. Well, I'm going to go down there. And I went down there, and sure enough, he was there. And by this time, of course, I'd been to the doctor several times. They stopped giving me my trazodone. I was losing weight. I was probably down to 146 pounds. I was basically drinking my life away and, vomiting blood and just, it wasn't good. Like I was in a bad way. And I went to talk with this guy, and I'm like, oh, it's going to be the same old song and dance. You need to quit drinking. You need to get your life in order. You need to. And so I went in and we sat down and talked. And, he asked me some questions, which I knew he would. Asked me about my family, how did substance use, affect my family and all this. And of course, it is what it is. And in the end, he said, well, I think, you need to go somewhere and get help, which, that was never going to be an option. I had a son who, Dylan, I think was maybe a year old at this point.
So you had a 1-year-old at home.
Well, yeah, with his mom, but yeah,
And you got bills to pay.
Yeah. Yep.
How are you going to be able to go somewhere for treatment when you have responsibility of a dad, responsibility to pay the bills?
Yeah. And so he told me, he said, well, I know a program, but he said, you got to go there for 12 months, which...
A year?
Yeah, I told him, I said, no, I ain't. That's just out of the question. I'm not going to go away for a year of my son's life. I said, this don't make sense. And he said, well, you can go for a year now and get better, or in a year, you won't be here, right? And then your son won't have you anyway.
So sacrifice the year while he's a baby, go get yourself taken care of, or not, and miss the rest of his life.
Yeah, which really upset me, right? Because one, I didn't know the person, and there's very few people outside of those that I trust that are ever going to be frank with me. And I just remember getting upset. But also I remember I couldn't deny the fact what he said is true, right? Because the doctor had just told me literally weeks before. He said outside of a year, he said, if you keep going the way you're going, you're probably going to...
So that's a pretty hard truth for someone to say to you. And you don't want it to be the case.
Nope.
So you're going to be upset.
Yep. And so he told me, he said, I know a place, Minnesota Teen Challenge in Minneapolis. And he said, but he said, you got to go for a year. And he said, like, the wait list is like 6 months right now. So I'm like, well, this is perfect. I mean, forget about it in 6 months, right? Like, it's, I remember filling out the application, and I left that day, and I'm like, okay, well, that was a waste of time. But I remember praying that night. I did. I remember praying. I looked out the window, and I said, God, I said, you've got to take me, or you got to help me, because I can't live this way anymore.
Well, Darin found himself at a crossroads where he knew something either needed a change or this was it for him. How about you? Have you ever been at that point in your life? A crossroads. Something needs to change. Well, Darin has much more to share on his journey, so be watching for the next part of his journey.